Hey guys, so we're going to finish up the unit today as far as our notes go. So I'm going to try to buzz through them very fast, and then you're going to review for the test, and then the test will be later this week. It's on the schedule that I will send out, or I've already sent out at this point. All right, so let's talk about President Jackson. So the first time that he was running for president, he was running against these individuals. Henry Clay, he's the one that did the Missouri Compromise. John Quincy Adams. His dad was the second president of the United States. John Adams, he gets the Quincy because he grew up, their hometown was Quincy, Massachusetts, so that'd be like your middle name being Neosho or Goodman or something. John C. Calhoun, we're going to hear a lot more about him as we get closer to the Civil War. I mean, I'm sorry I didn't find a painting for William H. Crawford, but he's running against those four individuals. When the election results came in, sorry, got a little off kilter there, you can see that actually Andrew Jackson got more votes. He got more electoral votes, so right here he got 99, and then he actually got more popular votes. So if you're looking up here, Jackson had the yellow states, John Quincy Adams was the blue states. However, just like today, they have to win a certain percentage. Today, the magic number is 271, and so come November election, you're going to hear, that a presidency is declared, someone's declared the winner when they get a certain percent of the electoral votes. All right. So the issue was he didn't receive enough, a high enough percent. So then it goes, like it always does, it's not up to the people anymore. It goes to Congress, and the Senate gets to vote. And they declare John Quincy Adams the winner. And Jackson said it was a corrupt bargain, that Adams had promised things to people in Congress in order to get elected. So he basically spends the next 4 years campaigning to run again. So he runs again in 1828, 4 years later, and this time, as in the readings it talked a little bit about, they attack his wife, Rachel. So apparently one of the issues was she was married to a person before Andrew, and she really honestly thought that the paperwork for the divorce had been finalized before she married Andrew, but in some sort of paperwork snafu, it hadn't been filed or signed correctly, and so it resulted in her to actually kind of being married to both men at the same time, which meant that she kind of had to divorce them and then get remarried to Andrew. So in 2020, we just look at that as a paperwork snafu, like it wasn't a big deal. But back then, they painted her as kind of a woman that wanted two husbands, which wasn't looked on favorably. So that caused a lot of stress in their lives. But he does end up winning the election, this time with a high enough percentage of the vote. He becomes president. The sad part is that before he can actually take office, so you have the election in November, but you don't actually take office till the very end of January, usually 1st of February, depending on how it falls in the calendar. And in those couple months span of time, Rachel Jackson, his wife, has a massive heart attack and dies. And so she never gets to go see him become president in the White House. And he enters the White House and he's at a total loss. He's very angry at the people that he thinks caused her death. He's very sad. A couple of things that happen. He invites people to the White House on the day of his inauguration to come and celebrate with him because he is for the common man. He didn't expect so many people to come to the White House. He figured maybe like 100 or so, and there were thousands. And so they swarmed the White House, and they were kind of the common man, what we would consider slightly hillbilly or redneck. And so they weren't behaving very refined. Things were getting broken by accident, tobacco juice staining the carpet, and it didn't go well. One of his other snafus was Big Block of Cheese Day, where the dairy farmers gave him basically a ton of cheese. It's this huge wheel of cheese you can see from this sketch, and he invited people to come talk to him and his cabinet members about issues that they were having, and cheese got all over the carpets and vacuum cleaners back then, and the White House stunk for a very, very long time. One of my favorite shows, it's on Netflix, so if you're at home and you're bored, Netflix, it's called The West Wing. They actually did 2 episodes about Big Block of Cheese Day, where they had a Big Block of Cheese Day again at the White House. So, anyway, food for thought. So, Jackson's critics also said that he put in place a spoils system. So if you think about what that means when you're spoiled, usually your mom says you're spoiled rotten or you're a spoiled brat. right? It's not the fact that you get everything, it's kind of your attitude about it. Well, Jackson had a spoil system that when he got into office, he fired 10% of all the governmental employees, and he gave their jobs to his buddies, who may not be qualified for the position. He also would just fire people just on a whim. So it was this kind of revolving, they call it his kitchen cabinet, revolving kitchen door of people in and out. Other criticisms, of course, come from his Native American policy of removing them off their land. Specifically, usually the Cherokee Nation is the one that people talk about, just because the trip that they took ended up being so deadly. Not that other tribes, so if you were a tribe that was removed during this time, you also had a very devastating trip to those reservation lands of Oklahoma as well. The Cherokee were, for all accounts, very civilized. They had homes, they had orchards, they dressed in Western-like clothing, they had their own written and printed language, they had their own newspaper, some of them even owned slaves, so they're adopting this white culture. Plus their land, if you can see, it's that gray, the golden color, actually spreads across 4 states. So I think a lot of times when we think about tribes, it's just a couple hundred people that are moved, maybe a small city. This is actually, you can see, I mean, they call it the Cherokee Nation, because it is so big. So the Cherokee, instead of, when they find out they're being forced off their land, instead of revolting, causing an outcry, things like that, they actually sue, because that's what the, white man would do. They would sue. It goes all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court actually rules in their favor and says, no, you don't have to move. It's your land legally. But Jackson's famous quote is, John Marshall, he was the Supreme Court judge, the Chief Justice at the time, said, he's made his decision, now let him enforce it. Because if you'll remember, the president is the one that controls our military. And so there is no way for the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court, to enforce their ruling. So they are forcibly removed off their land. So Jackson is defying a Supreme Court ruling, which doesn't help him when we're trying to figure out if he's a hero or a villain, right? When you're defying a direct Supreme Court order. So here are the common tribes when people talk about the Indian removal that were removed. You have the Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Seminole. So you can see the routes they took. You have a bunch of other Indian tribes that are also removed to Oklahoma. My husband's tribe, he's Osage. They were also removed and sent to Oklahoma during this time. So if you have some Native American ancestry and your tribe has tribal headquarters somewhere in Oklahoma, there's a good probability that they were removed during this time period as well. It just tends to be the Trail of Tears, specifically the Cherokee's trail, gets most notable just because of the amount of deaths and the lawsuits and things like that. So this is a famous painting about the Trail of Tears, and if you notice, intermingled with the Native Americans here and back here, the troops are with them, so it kept pushing them forward. They're armed, they, are leading this big brigade of them, essentially, to Oklahoma. Jackson said that he actually did this to protect the Native Americans, to keep them safe because so many people wanted their land. He also said that he didn't hate Native Americans. In fact, he had adopted a Native American son, which he had. But I'm like, it's not a puppy. Like, just because you adopted a Native American child doesn't mean that you're still doing what's best for the nations as a whole, right? So just deep thoughts about that. So when we're talking about Jackson and his actions, here's some deep thought questions to pause on, just things to keep in mind as we get closer to the test. So Jackson, you can pause, you can think about them before we move on. All right, so one other thing Jackson did had to do with the national bank. If you'll remember, we wanted to have a national bank. We were printing one currency. And so Jackson was not all about the national bank. He felt it was only giving loans to rich people. He thought that wasn't helping the common man. And so he was trying to find a way to destroy the monster bank, right? So basically he vetoed the extension of the bank. That meant that it expired. The bank went bankrupt. And it led to this huge almost mini depression, right? So because the bank goes bankrupt, banknotes, so think your money, like your dollar bills, lose their value, land sales plummet, credit's not available, businesses start to fail, unemployment rises. I mean, so we have this huge fallout from just not renewing the charter of the bank. And so even though this happens under Andrew Jackson, the person who really feels the brunt of it is going to be the next president, because the fallout from this really doesn't hit home until the next presidency, which is Martin Van Buren. Now, I am going to place a video just because we're not going to talk a lot about Martin Van Buren. There's a really funny, this is what it's going to look like when you start it, book commercial about Martin Van Buren that was on TV a couple years ago, I guess. And he's always noted for his hair. So you can kind of see it here, but you'll see why in the commercial. And I'll link it below. I'll title like Martin Van Buren video just to give you a chuckle for the day, right? All right, so Jackson heads into retirement. He feels very disgraced. His legacy is known, obviously, for the Indian Removal Act and the downfall of the bank, which led into this little mini depression. Cool thing, we actually have photographs. So this is Andrew Jackson. This is not during his presidency. This is about a year before he passed away, but we have real photographs of some of our people now. So we know exactly what they looked like. And hey, just look how much hair he still has. I mean, that's pretty impressive for a guy in his 70s, right? So, overall, deep thoughts about Andrew Jackson and his campaign and just life with him, right? All right, last two inventions real quickly. During this time period, we get the telegraph. So Samuel Morse, you've probably heard of Morse code, invents the telegraph. It's going to speed up communication. It is as fast as texting today, only instead of using satellites, it uses telegraph wire. Think of like telephone lines the way they used to be. This is what the actual machine looks like that you would tap out your message. It's a series of dots and dashes, short and long tones, and then this paper would also spit out. Now, it doesn't spit out letters, it spits out the dots and dashes. So then you would have to listen and translate or look and translate the message. So what I'm going to do also, besides the Martin Van Buren video, I'm going to put a couple about the telegraph, historically, how Abraham Lincoln used it, and then a couple funny ones, one from The Big Bang Theory and one of my favorites from The Office, showing how Morse code is used. Another invention, John Deere. No, it's not the tractor. It's not the lawnmower. His actual first invention is the steel plow. So he wasn't doing very good in business. He decides to move and start his hand at farming, but he can't get his plow through the very clay, rocky soil, kind of like what we have around here. And so he decides to put a steel edge. So this is this like deep in thought, the thinker about metal. He puts a steel edge on it. It goes through the dirt and a lot easier, the soil a lot easier. His neighbors like the idea. It catches on. Eventually he's making more money selling the plows and making the plows with a steel edge over farming, and that kind of kicks off the John Deere business today. But so originally he wasn't making huge combines or tractors or lawnmowers. It was this, and they definitely weren't John Deere green. Our last invention of the unit is Cyrus McCormick, and he invents the grain reaper. So think of the Grim Reaper, like Halloween time, the Grim Reaper. So whereas a grain reaper harvests grain, wheat, whatever it might be, the Grim Reaper just harvests bodies. But they both use, and you've seen it before, it's like the scythe, right? The like curved blade. So he wanted to make a better way. So instead of the back-breaking labor of that, instead these are like fan blades, but they're sharp, like blades, like knives, basically, kind of like the scythe. And so it's going to cut it, scoop the grain in the hopper, then it's going to go up and down this conveyor belt system to load on a wagon or in baskets. So instead of doing the back-breaking labor, now we have it into machines, right? And then this is our final glimpse of kind of some of the summary of all the inventions. It's basically a technology boom. So it's like when your parents were growing up, they went from not having a microwave or a cell phone or a computer to within a span of 15, 20 years having all that in their fingertips, right? A lot of your parents probably grew up with probably still having a TV that had a dial. And so just in their short span of time, technology has blown just out of proportion portion. The same thing happened back then as well. So I'll leave you with these kind of deep thoughts, and I will post all those extra videos that go with it. And if you have any questions, let me know.